you know what? Sometimes we got to be kids.
That's right. Let the professionals clean up the mess.
Are you going to mock a child?
Yes.
Well, yes, occasionally. Oh, yelling at kids. I love to yell at kids.
What?
Nothing.
You love to yell at kids?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's great fun. Play the role of the guy. Get off of my lawn. You don't do
You
that?
don't seem like the guy that would.
No, you'll do that someday.
Seem like you're the guy that would just stay inside the house.
That is actually what I do.
You wouldn't come out and yell at the kids.
Well, no, I would yell at kids, yes. But it's just very...
Well, you wouldn't come out of your house to yell at them.
That's right. Do it from inside the house where it's safe. All I can do is throw a brick through your window.
That's right. You don't want to cause the trouble, right?
I don't start the fights.
Finish him.
That's right.
Do you know about Bugs Bunny?
It's the Draftsmen Show. Yeah.
Marshall, I thought you were going to be a beanie guy now.
Oh, I've got my beanie.
Everybody thought you suddenly got young again.
Yeah. Let's see. We've got a beanie.
You've proved it. Now it was right there. You had it ready. It's like you weren't going to put it on. Stop pretending. It's like, where is it?
No, I carry it with me. So that if we need a dose.
You look so cool.
Do I?
Fresh.
Oh, man. I think I'm going to take the beanie off.
But it's cold.
It isn't cold. You don't want to do things like comb overs and...
I don't think you can comb anything over.
Yeah, right. Well, I never did. I would come in with a wig so that it was obvious. So, Stan, how you doing?
Oh, good. Did we start?
I don't know. I don't take charge here.
What's up, Marshall?
Hey,
Welcome back. Guess what? We're in the old set.
we're in the actual old set, the same part of the room.
Same
of the
corner.
set. Do you ever show people all of the stuff around there? Should
Yeah, I
we?
had a whole video about
Yeah, we had a whole video about it. Right.
about the building of the
I don't think people can imagine.
They don't need to. There's a video. There's a video
I'm
of
doing it anyway, just in case.
We have videos
taking up.
of this exact moment.
Yeah, of this exact
Got it.
moment. Let's
Got it.
start with you in the frame. Oh, wait, that was photo. I want video.
Yeah.
Let's start with you in the frame and then see if we can show all of this incredible, all the way over to Charlie. And then I'm, gosh, this could be really rough to do, but
Yeah.
I'm over here. Yeah.
Oh, that was great. This is what he looked like.
So I don't have grace and style. No. I don't care.
I mean, not at that moment, but anyway, yeah, we're back here because the Marvel set has been taken down. We're done with the Marvel course. It's completed.
How long? A year and a half?
2.5.
Two?
Something like this. Is a long time. It was as long as we didn't have this corner for the set, the Draftsman set.
Yeah.
We've been in the opposite corner, constantly having to break down the basic set. Anyway, we're here. We got new art. This time it's all originals.
That's right. Not those prints.
Yeah. What do you want to update everybody on? I heard there was some big news in your life.
You mean that I moved?
Oh yeah, that's it. I actually just said that not knowing it. I just wanted to see what you'd say, but yeah, that's actually a big change. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Moved from Orange County out to the local desert. Hotter sun.
Temecula?
Stronger sun, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Not like those wimpy beach cities with their 20-watt incandescent suns. This is a real aggressive sun.
It's like nuclear?
It's a sun that can kill you. But it also, if you just give it 5 minutes a day on either side of your body, it makes you strong. How about you? Any news in your life?
I'm moving.
Oh, yeah.
Are you moving into Marshall's old house?
Yeah.
No.
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 Wouldn't it be funny?
Wouldn't that be? But we could have had stuff like that. We could have swapped houses.
Weird though. No, it wouldn't be worth it even for the joke. But no, I'm moving. Yeah, just 20 minutes, 25 minutes north of here. I also had a baby.
We haven't done anything publicly together since you've had a baby.
Well, it's not yours.
No.
What are you trying to say?
I mean, we haven't done a podcast since you've had a baby, since
No, we
Melissa
haven't.
has had a baby.
No.
Since the two of you together.
Right.
Okay, so what do we say?
Are you trying to toast me?
Yeah, I'm trying to toast you. Yeah, here's to your new baby.
Yeah.
5 months old.
Yeah,
So life at home must be exciting.
it is. It's very exciting. The siblings are very, very good to him.
Good.
They're just loving it.
Well, we're good.
Anyway, yeah, we had a baby. We're moving. Everyone's gonna get their own room. Life's good. Everything good.
What are we going to talk about today?
Color, specifically how to learn color. We've done several episodes on how to learn X skill.
Let's be specific. We did one on how to learn anatomy.
Yes.
And it was well received, I think.
Both of the how to learn, we've only done 2, right? Anatomy and perspective.
We had to do how to learn composition. I kind of took that one. Yeah, we did that one during the pandemic. We did how to learn perspective here.
Yeah.
And that one was well received.
Yeah.
Although some people were irritated that Marshall keeps talking about the perspective course, which has not come out, and it has since. You should know that. Yeah.
Oh my God, doesn't it feel good? I can't make fun of you for that anymore. Was this the first time?
Yeah.
First?
No.
Oh, that's right. Last
When
time
we were over there in that corner, we
promoted it. Well, wait, we were
That was
promoting
before the actual release. Of
That
it,
was. We're launching the pre-sale at the. This is the first time it's actually out. So many big things have happened.
Yeah. This is not a podcast on color theory.
Yeah, we're not teaching you color.
Yeah,
we're teaching you how to learn color.
How can you say how to learn color without teaching a little color?
Well, a little bit, yeah, of course.
Or maybe a little more than a little.
I think I want to start with a little primer too, because it's going to be hard to say some words without even telling them what some of these words mean.
Exactly. I like that. You use the word
Just
primer.
a little bit of a primer.
Yeah.
Just a tiny bit.
Primer like imprimatura and like
Oh my God.
and like primer before you do the gray paint before you do the
Right.
Yeah,
you prime the canvas.
yeah.
With
Paint?
I mean, yeah, I guess it's paint.
What is it?
Gesso?
Oh yeah, gesso. Gesso is a primer.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I noticed that in your basics course,
Yeah.
you're teaching them about massing lights and darks, and you're also using metaphors of rivers and
Yeah.
and
well, that's this project.
oh, it was just when I saw it, I didn't get a chance to see it yet.
Well, this one hasn't come out yet, but it will when this episode comes out.
I thought that was great. You're getting them to think of land masses and stuff like
Yeah, I
that.
came up with that by myself.
That's great. Well, it's not unique, but it's unique to you.
Oh, wait, is not? What?
That's one that a number of people use, that you look at the way the world has
just
separated.
generally the world.
Yeah, you look at that, and then you see that is one way that I can compose is the way the world is composed.
Oh,
It's
okay.
composed by separating
So
the
you're
sea
saying that
from
I'm not the first one that has come up with a metaphor.
You came up with that for your class.
We're talking specifically about the way tiles of value
Yeah.
are composed on or arranged in a drawing.
Yeah.
And specifically lights and shadows, specifically those competing families.
Yeah.
How do you make them work together? And that's with rivers and oceans and lakes
Yes.
and puddles.
Do you mention swamps?
You could, whatever the really tiny floaters,
Yeah.
you can call those puddles or swamps, whatever
Right.
a swamp can be a bad floater and
And
maybe a little water,
Oasis in the desert.
oasis in the desert. Yeah, that
Yeah.
would be great.
so you could think of shadow as water and you can think of the light as land. So it could be islands
That's right.
and peninsulas.
That is so valuable for students. It was way, way into my picture making career before somebody explained that you're not massing your lights and darks and using land masses as versus sea and saying it's all swamps.
So
And
someone has said the specific analogy before?
Yeah, specifically,
the
yes.
land and ocean.
Yeah, Justin and Vance used that for a while, and that was one of the things. So look at how swampy it is. You mingle your lights and darks, and swamps are okay if they're transitions from one place to another, or you got a swampy area that you want to be swampy. But now you seem like you feel defeated because somebody thought of it.
I come up with a good idea, and then I learn that someone else has the same idea,
No,
and then I don't
it's
feel unique
not-
anymore.
That is not the issue. The issue is that you are in tune with artists.
This happens all the time.
Yeah,
I
but
come up with so many good ideas.
You're in tune with great artists for centuries, maybe millennia, who have looked at one thing and seen another. Okay, well, that'll come back into color theory someday.
Yeah, I don't know why we're talking about my basics course.
We're talking about your basics course because I was
It's not even about color. It's about drawing.
I know, but I was so impressed to see that you were teaching them land masses and thinking of them as rivers and or teaching
thank
them
you.
lights
I
and
was
darks.
impressed too. Not
yeah,
anymore.
well, okay, well, we don't want
Now I'm
to make it negative
copying
here. We want to
people.
keep this positive. Okay, sorry for the compliment.
All right. So, color. Do you want to start with a primer?
Gosh, color is important for an artist to learn unless they don't. Well, you start.
Primer of like, what is color? Like some things they need to know a little bit before we start telling them. Because I don't want to go into color theory, but we need to tell them a little bit. Okay, I'm just going to do it as quick as I possibly can. Okay, color is made up of 3 things. It's hue. Let's do value first, then hue, then saturation. Okay, value is the light and the dark. The hue is the family, like yellow, blue, green, orange, right? It's around the color wheel. You have these different colors. It's what people usually think color means, but there's actually all these other things to it. So how light or dark is it? Where is it on the color wheel? And then saturation is how bright is it? Like how much of the color is it versus how close is it to gray? It's on that scale. So those three properties together actually create what is color. You cannot separate those. They're always together, except if you do a black and white drawing or painting, then you're separate. Well, not really, because then your saturation is all the way down.
That's right.
And then your hue is any of it.
Yeah, if you want to be technical about it.
Yeah. So you got to know that color is made up of these three things.
Okay.
There's also temperature. When people say temperature, what that means is that your hue is simplified into just two families. So there's the hues, remember, those are the yellows and the oranges and the greens. So the hues are broken up into warms and cools. Mm-hmm. Those are your temperatures. And the warms are like the things around the orange and the yellow and the red. And then on the opposite side, you got your blues and your greens and your teals and
your ice and water and foliage colors.
Yeah. There's the edges that could kind of go both ways.
Violet could be warm. Violet could be cool.
Exactly.
And yellow can be
more greenish or more
greenish
orangish.
Yellow. Yeah, right.
Yeah. But it's also really important to know that it's all relative. So a purple that's more towards the cool will still look very warm if you put it next to a blue. So a temperature simply means how close is it to orange or how close is it to blue?
You can even put a gray against warm and it will look cool. And if you put a gray against cool, it will look warm.
You know the term? Me next to you and I look cool.
Oh yeah, because I'm so hot. Okay, now let's go back. There's a term for that. Should we mention it?
That was good, Marshall. I'm impressed. That was quick.
Yeah, there's a term for that.
Sex appeal.
Simultaneous contrast. Here is a way to learn color.
No, hold on. Are we already going to the resources?
No. Okay. So we're starting with theory.
I'm gonna turn down every idea you have.
Okay.
You ready?
I'm ready.
No, you're not.
I'm ready. No, go.
No, you're not.
Turn down every idea.
I am.
No, I'm ready.
Okay.
Maybe I should put on my beanie.
How about this? Okay, this is the order of events I have in mind, and maybe we can compare.
All right.
After this primer, which we're pretty much done, I think we don't need to go beyond that. Then we talk about theory versus intuition. That's a really important part for me. Mm-hmm. Then exercises, then common mistakes and resources. I have a big list of common mistakes.
Okay.
Let's save that one towards the end, actually, because they need to wait. They need to watch the whole episode to get to the good, juicy part.
Can we go back to theory just for a minute and not talk theory so much as to talk about what happened with me when I knew nothing about color?
Marshall, it's like you're a pro at this. You got to put in some personal stories.
I want to put in some context.
Let's do it.
Because it's called How to Learn Color.
Yeah.
And
what happened to you as a kid?
One of the worst ways to learn color is to go to some great colorist, someone who kicks with color. They're just great.
Right.
And you say, how do you do it? And you know what they often tell you?
It depends on the color. Some of them will say you feel it.
That is what they often, it's just all about, you got to feel it. Man, if you don't feel it, it's not going to be good. It all comes down to feeling. Mm-hmm. And to the student who doesn't know anything about how to manage the mixtures or about what the color wheel means and how it relates to your paint and how context and color schemes that can be set aside and strategies of color, to say all you got to do is feel it.
Yeah.
It's just laziness, or that I'm not used to putting this in words, because they're telling the truth. They are great colorists because they feel it.
Yeah.
But they're also neglecting the fact that there is a leading up to this feeling it. So I want to tell about how when I was 18 years old and I knew nothing about color, my first semester of color was great. My teacher was Don Wyden at the junior college, and in a matter of 3 sessions, he explained to us hue, saturation, and value.
I just did that in 30 seconds.
Yeah. But
boom, Don.
But he did it with examples so that when I was stepping out of the room, even while I was in the room, I was starting to notice everything in these 3 components, and it changed my perception, and it got me excited, and it got me excited enough to where I spent years pursuing knowledge of color. I studied the Munsell system. I really understood the color wheel. I categorized all my paints. I was discussing color with other people. And here's what I found out.
Sounds so boring, Marshall.
Actually, it was not boring. It was always interesting.
Were the people looking at your art having fun?
Here's what I started to find out.
Yeah.
That knowing more about color did not necessarily make my painting better, although sometimes it did.
Yep.
And knowing color did not necessarily make my painting worse, although sometimes it did.
Okay. So it has absolutely no effect.
It has an effect depending on how one uses it.
Okay.
And that is as a basis of knowledge that I know the color wheel, I know how to solve problems with a scientific. Let me give an analogy.
Okay.
That when I started to teach color theory, and I met with Nicholson, who was the guy who had taught color theory for years there. I didn't have him as a teacher, but I knew that he was a great teacher of color theory. And he explained, he put the science of color into context. He said, designing color is like designing perfumes. And that to design perfumes competently, it helps to be a bit of a chemist. And that stuck with me, that if you know something about chemistry, you can use it, but it is a means to an end, not an end of itself. Okay, that was to tell that I had to learn that over a period of years.
Yeah, it's a balance. You don't want to go too far into the theory without putting it into practice. And you don't want to just go start practicing without knowing some theory, because it's going to take you much longer. If you know just enough theory, it can really speed up and guide you to those solutions when you don't want to just brute force it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to brute force everything, right? Because if you know nothing about it and you have to rediscover all these things we already know about color and what tends to harmonize, then you're just kind of setting yourself up for a really long road. So know just enough, but you gotta go put it into practice. And the way I would do it is you kind of alternate, and everybody could do it a different way. Some people are super organized where they're like, okay, this week I'm gonna do just theory. This week I'm gonna go out and paint for a week. Or you can just do it randomly as it comes and goes, right? Mm-hmm. You realize you're missing some knowledge about color, you go and you research it, you study it for a few hours. Mm-hmm. And then the next day you go and when you're painting, you make sure you apply that thing that you learned. So those two together, this isn't actually just about color. This applies to everything.
Yes, it does.
You got to learn the theory, then you got to put it into practice to really ingrain it in. But I think it really, really makes sense for color because it is a very scientific thing. It's one of the most scientific things about art. Mm-hmm. The science of light. Like what else could be that scientific? I mean, maybe anatomy.
Yeah, but and here's a reason why with how to learn color, we should make some distinctions, as you already started to do. Knowing the color wheel and the difference between hue, value, and saturation is essential. Everybody's got to know that. Knowing about simultaneous contrast is valuable. But I think we should distinguish that there are a number of things about the science of color that, as interesting as they are, do not make better colorists. And so here is the most valuable theory. Here's stuff that can be valuable, and here's stuff that's not at all. And some of the stuff that can be valuable is things that I've heard artists decry and make fun of. The color schemes. Because the color schemes are color schemes. Somebody else made of those. That came out of a college.
There's not that many of them.
There's not that many of them, but if they are properly understood as schemes, not as strategies, then you learn these schemes so that you can then strategize your own, and you understand the basis of color schemes is very archetypal.
Yeah, it's a template. You start with it. You don't end with it. It's not like you're just copying the scheme and you're just sticking with it. It's a starting point. You say, I'm looking at something and it's very similar to this scheme, template that I know of. Let me just start with that and then adjust it to be what I want it to be. That it makes things so much more enjoyable, and it makes you vibe quicker with things. You know, if you don't have to rebuild everything all the time from the beginning.
If people warn you against the schemes, understanding the color schemes, observing them and using them at least makes you sensitive to a hidden pattern underneath color that can't be useless. It's got to have value. That somebody's pointing out a color scheme, you like that. You like the way that color smells. It's just got a good perfume to it.
Do colors have this distinct smell?
Well, I mean, metaphorically, it's using the Nicholson.
You're not the first one to use metaphors, you know.
I know. I follow a long tradition that goes back at least 3,000 to 5,000 years.
That's true.
Okay.
I just wanted to.
Yeah, you're just getting me back. It's revenge. Oh, man. Oh.
Just make sure you know, Marshall, you're not being
Brother,
unique.
everybody.
Does synesthesia make you smell colors?
That's true. I guess you're right. Sing it, Charlie.
That means you literally.
So it wasn't
it
a
triggers
metaphor.
olfactory nerves, apparently.
Yeah.
Because the brain can't make it. So should we go off on that, or should we?
No.
I'll let you structure this. Where are we headed?
Well, we're pretty much already talking about the theory versus intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And theory is all about going and studying, and you just learn things. You could do these. You can do that very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You could read all about color in a few weeks, and you're done.
Yeah.
Then it's really putting into practice, and that comes from repetition. It's always repetition, unfortunately, and that just takes time. And a lot of repetition comes down to deliberate practice. I have a list of exercises, so I'm going to come back to that later. But too much theory can also be very inhibitive, because color is such an expressive thing, concept, the tool that you can use in your art, that you can't be thinking about rules when you're trying to express.
Yeah.
And this kind of goes back to what you said, those masters of color, they say you got to feel it. It is true. It's just bad advice for a beginner because they have to start with some theory. But some students get too addicted to the theory and they don't go and internalize it.
Yeah.
And then start feeling it.
Yeah.
You have to eventually let go of all of those words in your head, and you have to start actually feeling and trusting your intuition about what colors are better. Eventually.
Yeah.
Bad advice for an absolute beginner, but as you get better at it, that is exactly the path you have to go down. You stop inhibiting yourself with too much theory, and you start feeling it, and you express yourself with color.
You de-inhibit yourself. Okay.
You out-hibit.
Let me tell you about when Bill Perkins took me to task for telling him that I did not have a talent for color. I was bragging to him about how my students get really good at color, but I'm not that good at color because I just don't have a talent for color. We were at Animation Expo and he was unloading boxes. And when he heard me say this, he stopped unloading the boxes and he animatedly explained to me that when he was a student at Art Center studying illustration, he knew he needed to learn color. And he took a color theory class, and then he started studying it and reading books in the library. And he had another teacher, head painting teacher named Dan McCaw, who he said was a great colorist, who found out that he was studying color so seriously. He said, color, you've either got it or you don't. And Bill said, I knew that I didn't have it and that I had to get it. So he painted a painting every day for 6 years. And while he was doing that, he was applying what he knew from color. And I think Bill is an excellent colorist, an excellent painter. If you don't know his work, we can be showing it. And he's worked a long time in the entertainment industry and, did stuff for Tangled and other stuff for big studios. But ever since then, I have learned not to say that I don't do good color because I don't have talent, but because I am lazy.
Oh, so that's why.
That's why. Yes. It's like being an athlete.
Right.
To be a good colorist, you have got to work on color and work on it. And I did hundreds and hundreds of color pieces for clients, but it was always to meet the deadline and it had to be efficient. And I was trying to do color, but I could only give a certain amount of attention to it. And if the client was happy with it, that was good enough.
Yeah.
So I did not nobody ever called me an excellent colorist.
Well, great to have you here.
Yeah, well, it's good to be here talking with you as a person who's leading with his weakness, but I hope to do that.
Cool story, bro.
You can always cut it out.
No, that was great. Thank you. It's very brave of you to share that.
I'm bragging about what my students, I've got students that do color so well that I'm jealous of them. And then they turn around later when we're in conversations, they have turned around and taught me stuff that is what I'm echoing here to you. When one of them, Bill was never my student.
So your students are teaching you about color.
My students have taught me some great lessons about color, which I might fit into here.
Nice.
But you go now.
You said your story was going to lead to exercise.
Well, when he painted
yeah.
for 6 years, every day, he said that,
Oh, okay. Yes.
yeah.
What did he do?
What do you do? Just paint?
Yeah.
He did mention, though, in keeping with this theme, he mentioned that people talk about right and wrong choices. He said there are right and wrong choices, but the way you get the sense of right versus wrong is by doing a lot of work to get there. You are spending years training your instincts, and there are some great ways to do that. Of course, one of them is to copy master color schemes.
Master
right?
studies.
Okay.
Yeah, master studies is one for sure. I learned a pretty good amount about color. Well, not learned. I practiced color quite a bit before I learned almost any color theory. I knew the base. I knew what a color wheel was, right? I knew that yellow was up here, and then you got reds and blue. Like I knew that, but I didn't really know any of the schemes that you're talking about. I really didn't know any of the science behind it. Like that light and pigment are totally different ways of mixing color. That they're not, like I had no idea how any of that worked.
RGB versus CMY versus RBY.
Or RYB.
Yeah.
Now you're confusing people.
Yeah. No, some people will understand that.
Yeah, some people. But I didn't learn.
Should we take 30 seconds on it?
So what is RGB?
RGB is red, green, blue, and it's the way people who are doing theater lighting need to study, and it's the way your monitor shows. It's when you mix red, green, and blue, and they are specific on the color wheel, red, green, and blue, they get lighter.
No, the color wheel is red, yellow, blue.
But I mean, they are specific points.
The artist's color
wheel. Yeah,
wheel.
the blue of blue is not the same as what people think of for blue, like cyan. But
right.
Here's the thing: when you when you put two colors together, they do not happen like they happen with paint and ink, and they get lighter. So you mix them all together, and you get white light. CMY is cyan, magenta, and black.
Yeah.
Because that was what the printing process evolved so that greens would look great in magazines. Yeah. And red, yellow, blue is what most children get taught because you put red and blue together and you get violet, and red and yellow together, you get orange, and yellow and blue together, you get green.
Isn't RGB also the way our eyes work? Yeah, we have 3 cones in our eyes, blue, green, and red.
Okay.
So our eyes work like monitors, because they take in light.
Yeah.
Just like a monitor takes in light. I think anyway, I'm not going to pretend I know. But, so yeah, RGB is the way our monitors work and our eyes work, and it's for light. For pigment, it's a little bit different because one is additive. When you add light together with another light color, it gets lighter. It gets white eventually. Yeah. When you add pigments together, they become black. So they're complete opposites. So CMYK is the more clean way to mix pigments to keep the colors pure, right?
Well, do you know the two primary system where you always have 2 yellows?
Oh yeah, warm cool primary palette.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
No, you have 2 yellows. One like the cadmiums, which deep cadmiums go toward orange, and then the Hansas that go toward green.
Yeah, that's a warm and a cool version of the primary.
Right, and then with the reds, same thing, right? Yep. You have a scarlet that goes toward hot and a alizarin crimson, and then the blue French ultramarine or
some people call it
manganese.
Split primary. Some people call it warm cool primary.
Yeah, I think those are very useful. Do you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because
it's one of my things later on for.
It spreads out the primary so that they're closer to the truth or the useful truth of how a painter can work. Okay, then that was, we can...
I'll bring that back up again.
Yeah, okay. RGB is the primaries of light.
Yes.
Where it's an additive medium. And CMY or RYB are subtractive mediums. When you mix them together, they lose their frequency. They lose their intensity.
Right.
Yeah.
They become black.
Okay, well, that was theory.
This point about additive and subtractive isn't just about theory. There's actually some practical reasons why it's helpful to know that. Mm-hmm. For example, if you're drawing or if you're painting from a monitor or from your iPad, this is light shining on you. It is impossible to replicate that with pigment. When you're painting from a monitor, you have to know that you're not trying to replicate the exact color you're seeing. You're trying to replicate the relationships between all the colors you're seeing. And that is extremely important to make sure that is your goal. Otherwise, you get really frustrated trying to mix that color and be like, I don't know how to mix colors. And it's like, yeah, you do. You just can't possibly do it.
Should I tell about my 5 years of frustration?
Did that happen to you?
Yes, because I watched Pinocchio when I was 18, 19. Yeah. Our teacher said, go see Pinocchio at the theater. This is 1976, 77. And I was there with my fellow art students, and our jaws dropped at how beautiful that film looked. And for years, I was trying to match. I went back to see it over and over. I was trying to match what was happening with the color. And I just recognized there's no way I can't it's never going to, the experience in the theater. I did not know that when I was seeing it as light, it was going to be a wider gamut than what can be done with paint, unless you use fluorescence and that kind of thing, but it artificializes it. But I didn't know that until many years later. And I had to kind of give up on it. But I gave up on it out of confusion. You know, as you're trying to smash your head through a brick wall when you could have just used a door. Well, but it would have been nice to know that.
Yeah. If only you had the internet back then.
If only.
You would have known the answer immediately.
All wisdom would have been there.
Yep. So I was talking about how I learned to practice color way before I learned the theory. The way I did that was through a lot of plein air painting. I think I've mentioned that several times before, but yeah. I think it's one of the most valuable exercises out there. Is you treat plein air painting as like a journal. You know how with journals it's kind of free form. You can go in there and you can just like play by play write about your day, or you can analyze your emotions, or you can write the things you're grateful for, right? It's just kind of like that day's entry is what you need that day, right? The way I treated plein air was exactly the same way. I did not have a very specific goal of like, this whole year I'm going to do this thing. This is how I'm going to journal. This is how I'm going to plein air paint. I would go out there not every day. It'd be like once or twice a week. And I would set up and I would look out there and I would just try to figure out, what am I doing today? And sometimes it would just be a play by play. I would just try to get exactly what I'm seeing. Sometimes I would try to experiment with the mood of the scene. Sometimes I would try to analyze or, try out a different palette that I'm trying to learn about, right? It's very different every time. And that made it very fun and also very practical for what I needed at the moment, what I'm struggling with and what I need to practice and what I need to do to just enjoy the process of learning. So keeping it free form, I think, is really important.
Or you can exercise the muscles that you need to exercise this week.
Exactly. Yeah. And not make it stale. It's fun because you have complete freedom to choose what you are doing. If you really just don't feel like doing theory that day, then just vibe. Try stuff. Mix some muddy colors. See if you could save it. That's the great thing about plein air painting is that it's really quick and you're out there, and even if you get a bad painting, you're still going to love it because you're out there, you got the fresh air, you got that sunburn afterwards. That was the worst part. Yeah, so that plein air painting, I treat it like journaling. And I think it becomes a very great exercise. And another really important thing to know, the way to approach it, just like sketchbooking, is that no single painting should be thought of as a masterpiece or even approached as trying to become a masterpiece. It's more about the cumulative effect of all of the paintings coming together. So years of doing that comes together as quite a lot of progress in internalizing color. And not just color, I mean composition and all sorts of stuff you'll learn through plein air painting.
This was over a period of how long a time?
Oh, this was many years.
Most of your plein, you said 7?
I guess.
But it's over a period of,
many years, yeah.
Most of that plein air painting was after you did know color theory?
No.
It was not.
It was before I learned color theory.
I see.
But I mean, not mostly. I would say about halfway through. I did many years of plein air painting before I learned color theory. Yeah. And then somewhere along there, I started learning color theory and I started applying it. So I was definitely just experimenting, throwing paint around before I knew color theory. But then the theory helped me keep going afterwards and keep growing.
There's a natural analogy for speaking. You don't learn to write and read before you speak. You speak and speak. You have no idea those things are spelled. You have no idea what they look like on paper. They're just sounds. Yeah. And then gradually easing into it. And then after learning all of that other stuff, going back to just speaking. Yeah.
And it was actually really important early on. I mostly just kind of fell in love with the process of going out there and painting. I knew I wasn't going to get a good painting. I didn't get any good paintings in the first several years. So it was just about enjoying that.
Yeah, it's a great secret. How could anybody ever become a good colorist without having some love of doing it?
You got me there. I don't know.
I mean, I'm asking rhetorically. It's like,
no, I don't.
It takes so much work.
Do you love it?
I love the experience of color. I don't even work in color anymore. I haven't worked in color for years.
Yeah.
I'm like a person who likes to eat at restaurants but doesn't really want to be a cook. They've cooked enough to know this is hard work. Degas said toward the end of his life that he might have regretted working in color, or he told that to a friend in his old age. I think Degas was a very good colorist. He was wonderfully subtle. He's worth studying for understatement of color. That you remember
because he just thought values were more important.
No, I think that, as often happens, Bob Mankoff did a speech at just a few weeks ago, a commencement speech at some college, and he ended with 80-year-old wisdom about what it likes a career in the arts. And he said, amateurs are happy with what they do.
And a professional is perpetually dissatisfied. In other words, the unhappier you are with your work, the better it is likely to be.
Mm-hmm. And I think when somebody's sensitivity is high, even if they've done well, they're going to look at it and say, oh, gosh, it could have been better. So yeah, I think he was tired and old and figured I could have been better if I just worked in value instead of color. I'm glad he didn't.
Sure.
Well,
is that what he was focused on? Is just being better?
I don't know.
That's maybe the problem. Is like should have been about the experience.
Well, yes. The reason I brought this up is that you enjoyed going out and doing the plein air painting. A person who doesn't enjoy it is unlikely to do it that way.
To do it frequently enough.
Right.
Yeah. That's why I think going out there early on without any theory at all was so important. Because instead of falling in love with applying color or anything, I just liked going out. That made me more likely to get good at it because enjoying it made me want to go out. I didn't have to convince myself every time that I need to practice.
Yeah.
Yeah. A huge part of falling in love with going out was that I almost never went out by myself.
There's always a social time.
It was always social.
Yeah.
Always. It was always you go out with an art buddy and then you go out for lunch afterwards.
Yeah.
And you're so hungry. So hungry afterwards. So you always get a reward at the end.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. No.
This is how you learn color. You hang out with friends.
This is how you learn how to draw and paint.
It is. We've made that point. You know, when people email me, as they do, about advice, I can't respond to 9 out of 10 anymore because there's too many of them.
Wow, you're so popular.
But when I do respond, it tends to be the same old thing.
What do you say?
Have you listened to our podcast? The secret is that you make it something.
Do you even live, bro?
You're around other people. And you have a community of people who are our fellow travelers so that you're not doing this journey alone. And I know that irritates people. I don't have people like that. I know it, but it is the most common thing. The people that I've seen get so great at color are almost always with somebody else who is, and they're batting the opinions back and forth. And when I asked Bill, can you give me a boiled down version of what you would want me to say? I talked to him last week on our podcast about how a student learns color. He said, paint from observation. Mm-hmm. And to do that over and over and over. And it sounds so non-creative. And yet the technical challenges of trying to match paint to vision are so challenging that if you're willing to do that year after year, you are going to have control of your instrument. You're going to have control of your music. You know how color works by that time.
At first, you're trying to match.
Yes.
Eventually, you compose.
As you mentioned.
Yeah.
You change the mood of it.
You change the mood of it, and you actually learn that you cannot match. When you're there for 3 hours, it changes.
Right.
You take a picture of when you start, and then when you end, it's a completely different scene. So you cannot possibly just paint from observation while it's changing in front of you and capture the colors as they are. You have to just kind of use it as a reference, as inspiration, and then create your own thing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just going to fail. Plein air painters learn that very quickly. It's like, what? That shadow? The sun is moving. So that shadow was pointing that way. Now it's pointing that way.
Yeah.
What am I supposed to do? Do I paint this shape or this shape? Like, it's, yeah.
And that's
So
where creativity kicks in.
that's where you
Because you're going to
choose.
make a choice.
You
I
can do
like it
whatever
with
you
the
want.
I'm going to make the shadow longer. I'm going to do it the
take
way
it out.
Yeah.
I don't like the
right.
shadows. I guess I'll mention another exercise. So, okay, I did do this quite a bit. This was more for in the studio, but you could totally apply it for plein air painting as well. Progressively changing your palette as you grow with color.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to list a lot of palettes. I'm sorry if it confuses people, but I'll try to explain them. So you start off very easy. You start off with just black and white.
Yeah.
This is no color or no hue, no saturation. It's still the value portion of color. And many people would argue that it is the most important part of color, is just the lights and the darks. And if you can't get that right, it doesn't matter what hue and saturation you assign to each value, because the values are just going to throw everything off all the time. So getting that right early on is extremely important. So if you're going to start with some palette, you just get some black paint, some white paint, and there you go. Stop wasting money on all those cadmiums. Get good at black and white. They're super cheap. You can also just get like acrylics or whatever. It's not like you're going to get a higher quality white or higher quality black. It's like,
You can just get mud and a stick.
yeah. No, but that's actually different. So that would be a pick out technique. So white and black is you're mixing the colors. There's also just black.
Okay, yeah.
Without the white.
Yeah.
And you're using transparency with the canvas.
So it's not like with graphite where you're using the white of the paper. You're actually mixing paint.
Right, you're
So it's
mixing the exact value you want,
Right.
mixing the right amount
I
of white,
got
the right
you.
amount of
Okay,
black.
that's a good distinction.
Yeah, but then there also is the pick out. You could do burn umber pick out, you could do black pick out, you can do alizarin pick out, whatever you want.
Yeah.
And you could still practice values that way. It's just you're not learning to mix paint anymore.
Yeah.
It's more about a drawing with paint.
Yeah.
So pick out is using the canvas.
It's using, you can erase the pigment
Yeah.
from the canvas with like a rag or Q-tips or your finger.
Just erasing.
Yeah, you pick pigment out to get white,
Yeah.
or you put pigment down to get black. It's like drawing. You put more graphite down, it gets darker.
So black and white, it could be mud and a stick with chalk, and you're having to mix them together to get your middle.
There you go.
Okay. But the idea, though, is that is a whole different, and in my experience, a more difficult process.
What is?
Mixing the paint into the middle values.
I would argue against that.
That's why I always tended to draw, is you just put down the graphite and then you can pick it out.
Interesting.
And then you can put it in darker, and you've got this same with watercolor. Whereas with,
Personally, I would think, to me, it's easier to mix the right value
okay.
than to pick out just enough to get that right value.
Okay.
Because that pressure is so sensitive. Like, I could pick out way too much and be like, ah. Or some people be like, okay, well, it's kind of just starting to dry up. You got to put some terp on it. And you pick it out. It's like, well, now terp just takes all of
That's
it off.
because you're using with oil. When you do it
Yeah.
with graphite, you've got
Oh,
such
with
control,
graphite,
or with,
absolutely.
even with watercolor for that matter. You can use a Q-tip and just pull out just a dry brush and pull a little bit out.
Okay.
But yeah, I think a lot of this is personal preference. Is that I tried gouache for years. I didn't like gouache. I made my living with acrylics, mostly opaque. Never liked. There's some good things about them, but then when it's like when you can choose your medium, I want a transparent medium.
Yeah.
And it was one reason why some of the color instruction that oil painters use is not applicable to watercolor, because you're assuming an opaque medium. This is another thing that took me years. The difference between opaque and transparent was something I understood it, but I wasn't really understanding it, how you have to strategize.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff about painting in general that we can go into, but that starts to get farther away from
Yeah,
color.
let's set it aside. Go. The point you were making was
You
start with value.
with no color. You
Right.
just learn black and white, but you don't have to like do this for years or anything. You just get a little bit comfortable with that. You can start experimenting with color pretty quickly after that. I'm not saying like don't like wait till you're ready for color. Always challenge yourself, but just remember, you always have that exercise to practice values if you notice you suck at that.
Okay.
For this next one, black and white plus a color. The reason is because now you have saturation to play with. So if you've got, let's say, alizarin is like a purpley red color, you got black and white, you can use straight up alizarin, you get a really bright color. Or you could add some black and white to it, and now you've dulled it down to a more mid-gray. Or you could just use black and white, and you get a pure gray. So now you've got that whole nother slider that you're adding to that black and white.
Yeah.
How saturated is the color? So now you're learning to control that, but you're not changing the colors. You don't have a yellow or a green or all that. You just got one color to worry about.
Yeah.
And you get good at the value and how much saturation there is. That's it. Naturally, you're going to add temperature in there because alizarin is going to be hot. And then when you bring it to gray, it's going to feel like it's cold. So you are also playing with temperature there, but not nearly as much as if you just like add a blue.
Yeah.
Or add a yellow to that.
There's no real wheel involved yet.
No, there's no wheel. It's two-dimensional. Mm-hmm. One dimension is the value. The second dimension is the saturation. Yeah. So that's the second temperature. The second one. The next one I would do is now you've got all the colors, but it's very limited. This is the Zorn palette. It's a very famous palette, and I would say that some people, this is good enough. You never really need anything beyond that if you're doing just portraits. The Zorn palette sucks for plein air painting. It's like very limited greens. The blues suck if you're trying to paint the sky and you're trying to get a specific mood. You can't do it. You're gonna get a rainy day every time, or a cloudy day. So you just can't do Zorn palette for certain things. But if you're doing portraits, you never need bright blue on the skin, And if somebody's wearing a bright blue shirt, change it. Who cares, right? So Zorn is ochre yellow, so it's kind of like a muted yellow. Cadmium red, which is a bright red, and then you've got a white and a black. Some people add some blue to their black so that it's like a very cold black. Mm-hmm. And so it's just those four colors, and you can mix your green with the yellow and the black, but it's just it's gonna be super muted. You can mix all of them, your whole color wheel, but most of them are muted except the red family. So that's the big difference there, is that you still are harmonizing because everything is muted except the red. So Zorn is great.
Didn't Leyendecker use the Zorn or something like it? Leyendecker used very limited palette.
Maybe some of them, but I mean, I'm pretty sure there's
when we were looking at a show of his originals that they did in Fullerton, we were noticing how limited the palette was and how those greens looked like they were mixed out of black and a muted yellow. Mm-hmm. Yeah, somebody mentioned that they did. Yeah,
Zorn is just probably the most famous palette as far as being able to get the kind of a.
But it limits the wheel.
It makes a big part of the wheel very dull, which is a positive. It harmonizes the colors together, so that
that's very good.
You don't have everything competing.
Yeah,
that's the big challenge. Is when some students feel like just throwing more color into the thing is going to be more colorful and more beautiful. It's like, no, it's just like with composition. If everything is fighting for attention, it just doesn't look good. You need a focal point. You need something that's telling the story, and everything else needs to just complement that story. So this forces you to basically say, yeah, red. Red is the hero, and everything else is there to support it.
Yeah.
Sometimes some people can do amazing things with that Zorn palette where you can't even tell. It'd be like, it's just so perfectly used that people aren't saying, wow, that's such a limited palette. Don't you want more color? It's like, no, it feels so colorful because they've used every possible thing you can out of that wheel. Yeah. And you harmonize it so beautifully, and their values are working so well.
Yes.
Right? So I wouldn't think of it as like a limiting thing. I would just say, try to learn its strengths. And anyway.
Yeah, it's like composing for the piano before you compose for the orchestra. You've got a left and a right hand, and the limitation can make some of the greatest works ever, but it also can be the start of something that can be turned into more. It's a good limitation. I want to make sure I understand it.
Okay.
The cool side of the spectrum of the wheel is going to be muted, but harmonized because it's all down there. And then the warm side, because you've got this one bright, was it cadmium red?
Yeah.
You got one really bright red.
Some people use it differently.
But you've got a red that's bright.
Yeah.
And it is going to be the part that is, like in music, it would be maybe more percussive or higher. It's going to call more attention to itself. And so you aren't bothered by the fact that you've got a cello and a piano. It's nice that each fits their own range, and you can compose a lot of stuff with that. It makes sense. It's, how did you put it? It was, I'm thinking it's contextual. It's making the cools are not competing in the same way with the warms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The greens, same thing. The only way to get a green is to mix that black with the ochre. Like, what kind of green is that, right?
Yeah, but it can be a pretty cool green when it's set against the red, right?
Absolutely. It feels very green when it's set against the red.
We always found that out in watercolor, that raw sienna students didn't like at first. Mm-hmm. Until they started using it and they found out how well it mixes and what a beautiful thing it does. It's just too dull a yellow. It doesn't even look like a yellow. It just looks like beach sand, kind of grainy, but what a great yellow in the hands of a person who knows what to surround it by.
Yeah.
Okay, so we went from value
and
to intensity.
Saturation, and now we've got everything but very limited.
And so the people know, sometimes saturation is called brightness.
Chroma.
Sometimes it's called chroma, sometimes it's called intensity, right?
Yeah.
Not important.
Subtle differences between those things, but that's where it gets too scientific, where it's like not very useful anymore.
Yeah, right.
So the next one is Zorn +1. So it's basically Zorn, but you say, I kind of want a nice bright green in there. Or I want a nice blue in there for the sky. So you just add one more.
Okay.
Pretty easy. You're just expanding it a little bit more. The next one, this is primaries, and white and black is optional.
Uh-huh.
So primaries, you've got your yellow. So and the primaries, these are the bright. You're not going to use like a ochre. You're going to use like a lemon yellow, a cad red, and like some people use ultramarine, but that's not. So like a cobalt blue or something, right? Mm-hmm. The true primaries, if we want to get really technical, would be more of a magenta, right? You'd try to mimic the CMYK thing. But again, we're getting too deep in there.
And also, we're getting into territory where magenta isn't even in the spectrum that the prism shows.
Yeah, but it is the best one to actually get the best complements, to mix them and get gray.
Yes.
And the best one to be able to mix the most saturated colors next to it.
It's one of my favorite colors in the whole palette.
Yeah. It's also why my daughter's name is...
That's right. Quinacridone magenta, which
rose.
is my... Quinacridone rose, okay. Yeah. Quinacridone magenta, the Winsor Newton colors. It's just it's just what a
super beautiful purpley magenta color.
It's just great. It goes great with manganese blue hue and the one that's got nickel in it, New Gamboge. Yeah, those three together are like the primary colors. I call them my McKay palette. But go ahead.
If you want to just go off of the printer, if you want to trust the scientists on this one, you got your yellow, you got your magenta, and the cyan. So you got the CMYK. By the way, my son's name is Cyan. Oh, snap. Cyan Thalo.
Wow.
That's his first name.
That's a meaningful name.
I'm proud of it. But anyway, so you've got those primaries, and you don't have to stick with cyan. You can just do some kind of bright blue, very chromatic blue, bright red, bright yellow. And you put white in there because you're going to have to lighten them. The black is optional because you can mix the blue and the magenta and you're getting a very dark color. You don't need to add black. You can also start practicing neutralizing, getting gray by mixing complements instead of adding black and white to it. That's one new thing you're starting to practice with this primary is how do I take extremely bright colors and start mixing things that are dull? Zorn will force you to do that. And now you're going to a thing where you're actually struggling to do that. You're practicing a very new thing, but it's an important skill to be able to mix complementary colors, the ones across the color wheel, to get gray that's in between them. You still with me, everybody?
I'm with you. I want to mention a story about one of my former students who became a very good colorist. He was my student the first semester that I taught back in 1984, and he went on to be an exhibiting artist and made his living in that way. And he told me when his color started to get really good, maybe a decade later, he had worked in a screen printing, a serigraph shop. And he said that people would come in with their color schemes of these prints that he would make, and they were just awful art. but his job was to match their colors exactly. And so he told me that he could look at any color and with no more than 3 cans of paint, match that color exactly. He said, occasionally I'll bring in a little dab of something from another can of paint. But he did this for years. And he got so in control of his color that you can see in his paintings, he could modulate it and have control over those intensities in really remarkable ways. It was like being a studio musician for years before you jam your own stuff.
Yeah, that's a very difficult skill to develop, is being able to quickly mix the paint color you need.
Yeah.
It's really time consuming. You're out there plein air painting and it's like, okay, I see it. I know the color I want. And you just mix for a little bit. Right? You're just sitting there mixing. You're not touching canvas at all. And the quicker you can get it, the faster you can just move on to the next one.
Yeah, good.
So if you can speed up how fast you can get your accurate color, you're just going to start enjoying the process more. So yeah, just some practice of just mixing, not even painting, but just mixing is really useful as well.
Yeah.
Because it can be really frustrating.
Right, more frustrating than a person would think when they first go into it. It's the naivety of oh, color should be easy. Just got to feel it.
Especially if you're impatient. Oh, well, what happens kind of towards the end of the painting? You start getting lazier, right? Your brain gets tired. You're just so tired of thinking about so many color mixes over and over again. You've just run out of the energy and you start saying that's good enough. And then your colors start to get hurt. And so you're starting to actually ruin your painting.
It is an argument for learning your instrument and learning music before you improv. Or if you want to improv at your best.
I think while.
But the thing is, this whole business of I'm going to do a really good painting in a limited amount of time is coming from having built up those skills. And yes, hand in hand.
They go together. Plein air painting will also force you to learn quick mixtures because we're going to run out of time if you don't get good at that. So they support each other.
Okay, where do we go from here?
Okay, after the primaries with white and optionally black, you go to warm, cool primary, which is what you mentioned already. So now instead of one of each primary, you have a warm and a cool version of each primary. This is going to get you the most chromatic possible range of all the hues. Instead of just having kind of the primary, like let's say a kind of a primary yellow, now you have a yellow that's a little bit more orange and a yellow that's a little bit more green. So that if you're going to be mixing some greens, you take the yellowy green and the greenish blue and you mix those together and you're going to get a better green than if you mix a blue and a yellow.
Yeah.
Pigment is not perfect.
Right.
So theoretically, you're supposed to get perfect all the colors with the primaries, but that's just theory. Pigment is dirty. Pigment depends on which metal you're using or whatever, how it's going to mix with the other thing that you're mixing, right?
And we're assuming that you want a brighter green.
This palette will get you that, if that's what you want.
If that's what you want. And it maybe should mention that I noticed how many landscape painters loved New Gamboge, which is an orange yellow. And it's like, why would you want an orange yellow? Because orange has got red in it, which is going to cancel out the greens. But they liked it because it muted the greens. You mix in that New Gamboge, and instead of getting a brighter green, you get a green that's a little more closer to nature. Yeah, but I get the idea that you've got a warm and a cool of a particular primary. So you've got Scarlet Lake and Alizarin Crimson, Prussian Blue and French Ultramarine, for example.
Or you'd get Cad Red and alizarin. Cad red would mix with the yellow to get the oranges.
Right.
The alizarin would mix with your warmer blue, ultramarine, to get your purples.
Your violets, right.
Yeah, but even then, you could probably get even brighter violets with some different colors.
You can, with magenta.
Yeah.
Oh, magenta and French ultramarine make a marvelous violet.
Yeah. Okay. Ultramarine is not even that bright of a color.
I know, but when you mix it with magenta.
Anyway, warm, cool primary. Then you got a bunch of stuff in between here. Like you could just come up with stuff like low key, high key primary. So you have a really bright primary and a really dull primary. Yeah. So now you don't have to mix the complements. You've still got both options if you want to dull it up or you want to brighten it up.
Give us an example.
lemon yellow, and ochre.
Okay.
So you got the bright one, you got the dull one.
Give us another one.
If we're sticking with cad red as your red, you can do cad red and like a Indian red or a terra rosa.
Yeah.
You know, some kind of brownish, reddish brown.
Yeah.
Right.
This is something that took me years to understand is where do colors like brown and tan and amber and all that fit in? And I kind of knew that amber was yellow, which is at its brightest when it's at a high value. And then if you try to make yellow darker, it can't be bright. And so it turns into amber or tan. Mm-hmm. But I did not know about how burnt sienna and burnt umber and the other browns fit into the wheel. They each have a
They all have a hue where they would lie, yeah. They're all just muted versions of the really high chromatic, and they're all kind of dark too.
Right. And when you mute a cool color, you don't call it brown. You might call it steel gray or even sepias tend to be toward green, at least most of the ones I'm familiar with. Mm-hmm. Sepias hardly look brown because they're leaning toward green.
Right. Yeah. They're kind of a darker gray or yellow.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then the last one there is just unlimited. Just throw whatever you want on your palette and whatever you're feeling at the moment. Right. Eventually, just you graduate to just putting a different palette out based on what you're painting. This is what I ended up doing most of the time when I'm plein air painting. Mm-hmm. Instead of sticking to one palette, I had 30 colors in my bag, and I would just look out there, try to envision a painting, be like, okay, I want these colors, and I'd put them out and then work with that.
How many did you ever limit yourself to that it could only be this many?
Really, no.
But were you inclined to limit yourself, though, to know that too many would be cacophony?
Sometimes I'd be like, I kind of want a lot of this stuff to be muted this time, so I don't really need these bright colors. I'm not going to use them. I could just mix it with these other ones. And I would just put down 3 or 4 or 5 colors. Other times I'm out there and it's like a sunny day and you got flowers and you got the bright blues in the sky and in the waves, and you got some turquoisey colors in the water, and you got just so many colors everywhere. I'm like, I guess I'll just try putting them all out there. Not all of them, but I would put out a bunch of bright ones.
Yeah.
And then maybe occasionally a few, they're called convenience colors, where you could see like, okay, that hill back there is very similar to this one like grayish steel blue, whatever, that I have in my bag. I don't know. That's not
so you can, but you can use the one for the other.
Yeah, I'd be like that. I could see a large part of this composition is going to be this color that is very similar to one that I already have mixed in this tube.
Yeah.
Just put it out there. It's convenient.
Right. Convenient.
You don't have to keep mixing it over and over again.
Yeah.
So there's a convenience color. And then you can just add that onto the side of your palette. And
yeah.
Anyway, those are all the palettes. That's a long segment. Hopefully it's useful though.
Well, yeah, there's something I really like about what you presented is that you start so simply and you graduate to anything else. One of the problems I always had is that I wanted to eat every kind of candy in the store in one sitting, and you get so much color. And I found out as time went on, I remember one person who wrote a book on the master's palettes said that there was a principle that the greater the master, the smaller the palette, which is not always true, but it's true enough because they can get so much more out of a few colors.
There's no reason to make it difficult on yourself. If you know you're not going to need any bright reds in this painting, don't put out any bright reds. Just mix a red with a nice yellow and a nice, like some purpley thing. If it's going to be a really muted.
Yeah, mix it out of secondaries and it'll still go that way.
It'll still be kind of red. But if you really don't need a red,
leave it out.
If it's okay to feel red next to all the other ones, then that's all you need. So you just limit it down to what you need. But knowing that, that's where the experience comes in. You got to know that this is going to be what you need, and you can limit it down to this. And the great thing is, if while you're painting, you're like, no, I can't get that red that I want, you just take out a red. You just put it on your palette.
Yeah, I was surprised in those watercolor classes where we would watch videos of really good watercolors, how many landscape painters didn't have green in their palette. One of them even said, I don't want green in my palette.
Yeah, you mix the greens.
He always mixed the greens because it makes them more reverberant.
Yeah,
makes them more
variety. Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you go out there in nature how much variety there is in the greens.
Yeah.
There's yellowish greens, there's reddish greens, there's bluish greens, there's muted greens, there's bright greens. There are so many greens. If you just make them all really bright teal. God, that could be so ugly.
I know.
Oh,
Yeah, one thing that landscape painters find out is how much green in nature is toward yellow.
Mhm.
There are a few blue-greens,
Red.
but only few. Pardon?
and red.
And toward red?
Yeah, it's the opposite.
Because the sunlight on it?
Just when in the shadows,
Oh.
you start
Start to
feeling a red
see
sparkle in the greens.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah, that's the simultaneous contrast thing.
Yeah.
So the people know what simultaneous contrast is. James Gurney has very good examples of it, where you can take a gray and make it look red.
Is there a chapter on it? Oh, he does.
Yeah, the same gray
140 page
will look
147.
blue, or the same gray will look orange, depending on what you surround it by. But it has absolutely no color in it. It's just an invention that the mind does or the eye does. I'm not sure how much of it is the eye and how much of it is the brain that tends to change the perception of the color because of the surroundings. It may have something to do with the eye. And the reason I guess that is because you exhaust the ability of parts of the eye to see that color. Like you get numb to it. So it starts to invent the other. But that's for the scientists.
Okay. Well, this page goes, it's simultaneous contrast, but with a bunch of other stuff
Okay.
that you need for context to understand
we
this
can,
page.
we can
So
show
I'm not
examples of, oh gosh, it's one of the most popular things about color on the internet that people, hey, watch this. And it happens with value too. You take the same gray and it's light. If you put it against dark, okay.
Oh, color's even more that way.
I want to tell about an exercise we learned to do in the watercolor class that was really useful
Yeah.
for this business of what you're observing about landscape painters. It has to happen halfway through the semester because you've got to be familiar with your palette and why yellow ochre versus raw sienna and all of the other things. Then we would go to the Natural History Museum where they have this gem and mineral room with these beautiful natural minerals, dimly lit. You can't paint in there, but you go in there with your watercolor paper and you do a line drawing of some of these minerals and you make notes which colors I would use to reproduce that violet with those streaks of blue through it, or reproduce that jade look. Then, when you've made all your notes, knowing your palette, go out into the sunlight, into the shade, and paint it with your watercolor. Then go back in and compare. And there are at least 3 lessons that were common. One is everybody overstates color. When you look at it, it's much more subtle than that. Another one is that some students oversimplify color. Well, it was green. I painted with green. It's green paint.
Yeah.
What do you want me to do? Other students would overcomplicate color because they were more sophisticated and they were seeing how much there were little flecks of that in that, and so they would overdo that.
They
and
exaggerate the subtle
that's
qualities
right,
that to
which
not be
means
subtle
they would
anymore.
lose the effect of the whole thing that sort of masses into simplicity.
Yeah.
But there were 2 advantages of this. One of them was technical. It's just purely technical. I'm learning my paints. But there was another creative advantage. You're doing it in response to beautiful things. And so the same thing can be applied to, as you've done with plein air painting, doing it with beautiful landscapes.
Yeah.
You can also do it with beautiful works of art that you admire the color.
Yeah, all the stuff I'm talking about with plein air painting, you could do in the studio with portraits.
Right.
Or with still life, or whatever it is that you're into.
Yeah.
Well, here's an exercise. I did this one several times. You take a black and white photograph and you paint it in color.
Yeah.
I did this one out of necessity because one of my parents' friends came to me. This was when I was still too young and not knowing much about color. He's like, hey, can you paint my grandfather? And all he had was a black and white photo of him. And I was like, okay, sure. He's like, but I want it in color. I was like, what? So I had to invent the colors. I was smart. I limited my palette. It was
Good.
very limited. I think I just got I think it might have been a Zorn plus ultramarine.
Okay.
I did another one like that, and it was very useful to have a master painting by somebody whose palette I'm using as inspiration. So if you're just starting from a black and white photo and you're just like, let's see what happens, I'm just going to invent the colors from my head, you could do it, but you're probably going to fail if you've never done it before and if you are kind of new to color. So if you're just doing it for the first time, it is very helpful to have inspiration, because it kind of guides you it shows you like, yeah, let's just mute our reds for this one. Right? Let's keep the yellows really bright, and then for the shadows, we're gonna make all of them kind of purpley. Right? And so you're just like, okay, I'm gonna stick to that.
That's great.
Whatever it is, but you've got to pick something that where this palette will work with the painting you're doing. You know, look at the lighting. You know, if you're doing an outdoor somebody's in the sunlight, and then you're copying a painter who's painting a cloudy day, it's probably not the best choice.
Yeah.
You know, pick a similar vibe.
Well, it doesn't get much better than that. I had a second year of junior college. We had a teacher who said, black and white photograph, do color. The thing I learned from it is that you can make up color. You can be creative with color. That was a good thing. Do not be bound. I had watercolor students who could not paint a sky any color other than what it was in the photograph and everything else. Like, they just felt uncomfortable doing it. I didn't feel uncomfortable doing it. But what I missed was that second part of the exercise, which don't just make it up. If you're not that skilled yet, have a touchstone, have something somebody else has done that you can, and an appropriate one.
Yeah. It's kind of a mix of a master study and black and white transformation.
Yeah.
Just mixing those two together.
That's valuable.
It's colorful.
Chromatic.
And the last one on here that I had was master studies, which you've mentioned before. Which you just take a painting of someone whose colors you like and you just try to replicate it. See, well, what did they do? Which colors did they limit? How are they harmonizing their colors and all that? And every artist that you study is going to have different methods of harmonizing and different palettes that they're using. And it's just so much. It sounds simple, like, oh, that's it? You're just going to copy? It's like, yeah, but there's so much involved here. You're going to have more questions than you had going in after you're done with it, which is good because then you can research and then you can.
But that's part of why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Is that a person who would watch how to learn color is probably someone who's about to learn color, and we're letting them know that there's some difficult challenges ahead. But this business of everybody's got a different approach, which it's incredible how many colorists have different approaches.
Yeah.
But you could say that from a creativity point of view and a technical point of view, that it's always balancing unity and diversity. That you try to put all the colors in there and you end up with crazy, too much diversity. It's not unified.
Yeah.
And Drew Struzan explained to us, Drew is a very good colorist, and he was thoughtful about color. But I remember he explained to a group of us illustrators, he said, I just use whatever color I want, and if it gets out of hand, I'd mix up a very thin mist of yellow ochre and spray it over, and it just pulls it all together. So he's talking about chasing diversity according to his whim and then unifying it with a transparent wash of yellow ochre over the top. Whereas an imprimatura is the opposite of that. You start out with a warm underpainting, presumably, and then if that color makes its way into all of the other colors you've got, it's going to help hold them together.
Yeah. Any parts of your painting that are transparent will show through a little bit.
Yeah.
Just kind of like how Zorn unifies everything with like dullness, a grayness.
Yeah.
And with a red.
When you're trying to learn color, I think it helps to look, if you've got a variety of colorists who are telling you different things and yanking you all over because they've got so many different approaches, treat it like that color scheme that Drew was doing and say, how do I bring it together? And one way to bring it together is to get a few simple maxims. What do they have in common? They are all balancing the complexity and the simplicity. They're all balancing diversity and unity. They're balancing the real world versus what they imagine. If you can just get a few principles that will unite the people who argue about how you do color, that can help. Now, what else do we have to do with this? We were going to talk about resources.
Yeah. A great transition from exercises to resources is mentioning Richard Schmidt's exercises.
Okay, good.
So he's got Alla Prima, right? This is the OG. This is the first one that came out.
That
then
was the one
came out with Alla Prima 2.
Never read that.
It's just a bigger version of it. It's like an expanded version of this. You don't need both. So this one is everything I know about painting. This is everything I know about painting and more.
Okay.
So it's the same. Then he's got Alla Prima 2 Companion, which is Richard Schmidt's materials, tools, and techniques. So I would say for color, you probably don't need this one. The first one is more valuable. And this is where he has the color charts. Oh, geez. So he did these sort of things where he just had tiles and tiles, and he would do mixtures of all the colors on his palette and see everything he can get with the colors on his palette. I've never done it.
Do you see value in it?
I do see value in it. I think it is valuable to do that so you could see how far you can go with your palette and what your options are. What happens when you mix this and this? What happens if I put a little bit more of this one? What happens if I add white to both of those now? And you have all these combinations. And when you go through the motions of doing that, you will absolutely have a better idea of what your palette can do. You'll just be more in tune with it, and it will help you mix faster. You can also get there by just painting more and mixing the colors you see in front of you and trying to get there. You're still going to mix a bunch of paint and be like, no, that's wrong, but I got that. Now let me try putting a little bit more. No, it's still off of what I'm seeing, but I got that. You're still doing that, just not in such a structured way. It's more jazz. This is like you're creating your periodic table.
Yes.
And you going out and just doing it is like you're a mad scientist and you're just like mixing stuff, see what happens.
Yeah.
And then you can discover gold.
I have been around students who with other teachers...
Or fool's gold.
Pardon?
You can mix fool's gold and then
Yes.
You can... Yeah. Trying to come up with metaphors.
I've been around students who other teachers were making them mix all the way around the colorway, all the tints and shades and and they had to match it, and brutally. And it did them good.
Yeah.
They really got good with their color. So it was the boot camp.
It is. I don't see how anyone can enjoy that.
Yeah.
Some people probably do.
There's one way to make you enjoy it, and that's make a good design that you're going to look really cool. I tried.
Well, they do look cool. What I did do was I created a color wheel.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, how many steps was it? I think it was like 14 steps around.
Yeah.
Something like that, or 12. You got 3 rings. So the outer ring was as saturated as you can possibly mix. So you keep your mixtures clean and you put it down, and you have to get the same amount of step in between each. You can't just be like yellow, kind of yellow, a little bit less yellow, red, right? You have to get a very clean gradation around, and you have to mix it really well.
Very good.
Then you go into the next ring and it's mid-value.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, mid-saturation.
Mid-saturation, because it's going toward gray, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so now you have to figure out, how do I mix it so that it stays the same hue? Because I'm going up and down. I'm not going left and right.
And you're doing this by mixing complements.
Not only, that's where it gets really challenging. Because if you just make yellow duller, you're making it more green.
I know.
It is going to look green. It is not going to appear like it's in that same column.
I know what you mean.
So you have to add some orange to it to bring it back. It gets extremely complicated. It sounds like you could just start adding gray to go down or into the next ring, but no, you cannot. You start realizing how pigment is not theoretical.
Right.
It is going to drive you in completely different directions than what you expect, and you have to correct it.
We found that out when we were kids and we were trying to do Easter egg dyes, and you'd put red and blue will make purple, and they didn't. They made they made brown because of the kind of red and the kind of blue that they were. Right. And so yeah.
Okay. Or did you just have really cheap paint?
Well, no. It's sort of like trying to mix a green out of a blue violet. French ultramarine makes really muddy, really dirty looking greens.
Yeah. You had a cool blue and a warmer red instead of the warm blue and the cool red.
And so they were coming together to make the cool blue had yellow in it.
Yeah.
Which, yeah.
But now we're getting too scientific. Okay. Now can you show your mixtures, your little charts?
Okay, this is not mixtures.
Not mixtures. You're learning the palette.
When I was doing airbrush work under deadlines all the time, and I had so many brands of paint, I needed to know where each tube, they weren't tubes of paint, they were little vials of paint, was on the wheel. And so I would spread them all out, and I even did light tests. And I've got them by colors, this is Mary, this is Badger, this is Holbein, this is Comart, and I'd see which ones were the most. There was Comart transparent and Comart opaques.
Now, why did you make them so small?
Because I wanted them to be conveniently
you wanted to bring them around with you, please?
Oh, no, this was in my studio.
Oh.
This was all, I always did airbrush in my studio.
So you just want it like next to you or something?
I want it there so I can look at it and I can go, that color is a friend of this color. And then I can know which color to pick. But I had them all out here. And then as I was learning the systems, the Munsell color system and how you unwrap the color wheel to go left to right.
Wait, hold that up.
This would show me where each color was, not only for its position on the color wheel, but for its position on the value scale to see where it's going to be at its brightest. And so it was really just rating these things according to the Munsell color system, which was ubiquitous. Everybody was using it. I took the time to make it so that if I had to move or go somewhere else to do airbrushing, I had all of my different brands of paints in these same size thing, and I cut with illustration board. I cut so that they would fit in there just right. I remember my son was 2.5, and he was a talker. He sat and watched me in my studio for about an hour while I was working on this one time and never said a word. He went into an altered state of consciousness. And I think it was because it's a beautiful array of colors.
It's nice. Yeah.
We're assembling something that's a bit like a work of art. And I'm here in the presence of these things. He knew that they are forbidden to touch or to put in your mouth because of cadmiums and cobalts and nickels.
And quarters.
And leads.
Dimes and pennies.
No.
No?
We're talking about poisonous metals. That you want to keep the kids away from.
Got it.
Or even off your own skin. You know about that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there were Liquitex. Liquitex had these charts where they actually included the acrylic paint on there. Those are not swatches that are printed. They're actually paint swabs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
They don't do that anymore.
They spend a lot of money to do these things, but it meant that you would really know your system. Now, all of that is to say that was to learn about the palettes and the colors. Actually, it was about the colors, not about the palettes. The palettes started to come with any positive hope later in watercolor because watercolors are portable. For example, as I mentioned earlier, I have the McKay palette here. The McKay palette means that it is based on the cyan, magenta, yellow, which is close to the old printing, that you can use to make sure your color will always be simple and diverse because it's the colors they use in the 4-color process. K is black, so that wouldn't get confused with blue. And Winsor McKay's color all had to be printed that way, and it could be gloriously diverse, and yet it would hold together. He couldn't get violets because you're trying to get violet out of a cyan, which has yellow in it. So it would mute the violet. And he could get reds because the printing process was okay if you put 100% yellow down and that magenta, which is terrible for reds. You could get a pretty decent red. And it was also on warm paper too, because the newsprint, as it would age, would look old. Okay, that's too much about that.
No, it's great.
This was my Delectable Mountain palette, which was like a traditional palette.
These palettes that you have, they seem like they're really, it's kind of like what James Gurney has. He's got these tiny watercolor palettes that he brings with him, and he can pull it out as he's sitting anywhere.
Yeah, that's what I liked about it.
And he can do a little painting.
Yeah.
Did you bring these out on location?
I did when I was with classes.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Because that's what we were doing. We were trying to design our own palettes. And, this what I call the Delectable Mountain palette, really, it's just an old master's palette. And when you look at
the old master? It's your palette. Are you calling yourself an old master?
No, I'm not. Let me finish.
Okay.
This thing looks so dull when you see it as watercolor because watercolor gets its transparency from thinning down with water. So that's why you also make a piece of paper that's got it on there at full strength and and diluted so that you can see where it's going to go when you actually paint with it. And then we've got the versatile palette and the bright palette. We even did these things where we would choose our favorite cool colors, get them all together in one palette, and then make your cool palette.
That's cool. Do you have the nerdy palette as well?
What is the nerdy palette?
It's the opposite of the cool palette.
Oh, yeah. This is the warm. No, it's the warm palette. You misread it.
Well, nerds have to be warm and nice because.
And these are all Winsor Newton watercolors because that was what Daniel Smith watercolors are great too. But these were the ones that we use. So we have a warm palette and a cool palette, and that way you can limit your painting to be a basically warm palette. Oh, I'm going to go over to my cool palette. I'm going to pull a little bit out of it, or not. I'm just going to mix a few of these that are complementary together. They go great and they start to look cool. You can do the same thing with the warm palette. And then what else do we have here? I think we've got...
Looks like you did so much with color. You say you're not good at color?
I never had good instincts. I want to talk one thing about that. I never had good instincts for choosing the colors.
Okay. But you got the theory down.
Oh, I got the theory down. There was no question about that. That's why I'm an anti-model for you. Don't study too much theory to where it's not making you a better colorist.
Did all those little color palettes come pre-assembled like that? Or
no, they don't. All these little color palettes,
Good
Charlie
question.
asked if they come pre-assembled. All these color palettes are, I think they were Winsor Newton. Yeah, Winsor Newton palettes. There are all sorts of different sizes of them. And they would come with dry cakes.
Separately?
No,
Or inside of them?
They were usually the cheaper Cotman series.
Okay.
So I would just take those and give
got
them
it.
to somebody.
And then you got a tube of watercolor?
And then got a tube of color. And some people have said you shouldn't do that because cakes are made to be cakes and tubes are made to be tubes. But it has never had... I take it back. It has had trouble.
Oh, like what?
Some colors. Phthalocyanine green, phthalocyanine blues, etc.
Phthalo is the one that I know is used for like both blue and green, and they get extremely...
They're so concentrated that one little tube will cover a wall. Then I put them into here, and then I also make some mixtures that aren't mixtures. They are just two of the same colors in the same well, so that if I want them both, I'm not going to contaminate the pure version. I can just dip a brush in there, and that way is going to get me something that's toward orange or toward violet or toward green because it's already mixed.
So the other resources, other than Richard Schmidt and the whole book is good. It's not just the color charts thing. The whole book is just amazing on actual practical advice on how to paint, and then the color stuff in there is very, very useful. The other only one that I've used is James Gurney's book.
And when you say James Gurney's book, you mean Color and Light?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I pulled it up.
Yeah, that is
Color and Light,
a
James Gurney.
great book for beginners to understand it, even pros.
And they're really good because each page is like a new chapter.
Yeah.
It's like a new little topic.
Yeah.
Like you got one thing on color accents, right? The next one, triads, right? And then I can't read this upside down. Color, the light, interactions. You know, every page is just like a little snippet that you could just read in the bathroom.
Yeah.
And then the other one, just as kind of inspiration, is those Pixar art of books. I forgot which one it was that was really cool. I know there's the Incredibles, where they have their mood boards, you know?
Yeah,
it's like the whole movie, but it's just the colors for every scene, and you could see how the feeling of the movie changes as you go.
Mm-hmm.
Those are pretty cool.
They are.
I have a few of those, and just really cool looking to see how they thought about just the colors of their scenes as it transitions. It's just really cool to look at that.
Yeah.
And then I brought this one in just to show how amazingly lucky everybody watching is to have the resources that they do now in learning color, because everybody watching right now, this is how people used to study color. Do you guys see me flipping this book?
I read that entire book from beginning to end.
So fun. Look at how inspiring all those colors are.
So you're not recommending it?
No. I mean, I've never read it. It might be amazing. The theory in here might be so good. Probably. I mean, I have it for some reason on here, but come on, there is no way I'm learning about color from a textbook that has no color in it.
When I look at you flip through that book, it gives me a feeling that I've heard some rock and rollers talk about the 60s or 70s, is that they were so on drugs that they say, I can't remember anything. It was just a big blur.
What? Wait, how is that related?
I read that book.
And it's a big blur?
I can't remember. And I read it out of responsibility. This was
Right.
Walter Sargent's book was one, but there are some books that are classic texts, like Johannes Itten, Itten. There's a big, thick version of it, and there's a shorter version of it. Those actually are useful, and he introduces the issue of comparing color to music, color notes, color chords, color harmonies.
Yeah.
He's very big on context, very big on that color exists around other colors. And so it's not just that you've got a saxophone or a cello or whatever, you've got it interacting with other instruments. And so he was quite disciplined in his approach to that.
Yeah.
But I think if I were a student seeking to know color now, no mystery where I'd go. I would go to James Gurney's book. My criticism of Alla Prima was that it was for oil painters. And because
Why is that criticism?
But I was not painting in oil, and a number of the things he said were specifically.
Oh, almost everything. It's about how to paint in oil. What is it called?
That was it.
Oh, it's everything I know about painting. But it's alla prima painting, which is a technique for specifically oil paint.
Yeah.
You're not going to do that with watercolor. You can do it with acrylic.
That you can do it with opaque acrylic, right?
Yes.
Right.
But it's alla prima paint. It's a very specific style that's...
Yes. It was a great book. I'm glad I read it.
Yeah.
But it was not...
But also, what are you doing with watercolors?
What am I doing with it?
Just kidding. I'm just trying to start a fight. Oil painting is king, so.
Well, oil paint, one of the things we found out is that for people who are going to go into it as a profession, that you will make more money doing an oil paint that if you did a watercolor of the same size, it will sell for less. And I thought, you've got to be kidding me.
That's true.
I love the look of watercolor.
I like the look of watercolors as well.
Winslow Homer's watercolors are better than his oil paintings in some of our opinions. His oil paintings were great, but there was something about his watercolors. Sargent, you can't say one's better than the other because he was so good at both of them.
Sargent's watercolors are so good.
They are so good. They're breathtaking.
Yeah.
Homer and Sargent were the two ones who dominated the class. And then there were scores of others, a lot of them British. Mm-hmm. Then the Americans started to come up with a lot of the watercolors, early part of the 20th century. But we were learning about painting history specifically through the lens of great watercolorists. And so many different approaches to it, too. But back to color.
What are your resources?
Marco Bucci.
Yeah.
Ahmed Al-Douri. Did I pronounce his name right?
Yeah.
Ahmed, forgive me if I didn't.
No, that's right.
Jeremy Vickery. Yeah. Jeremy Vickery is a famous color teacher. And just show the placard of his what is it called? Coloring or painting with light or something like that? Or?
Yeah, 101.
Oh, yeah.
And he has a 102 as well.
And they're
all on PROKO.
They're all on PROKO, and he's a good teacher. He did Noman DVDs years ago. Vance Kovacs.
No, it's on PROKO.
Yeah, that's what I mean, yeah. I would go to some good colorists who also teach well and learn from them, and then just...
You're talking about those three, right?
I'm talking about...
You're not talking about... Yeah, there's Marco Bucci, Jeremy Vickery, Ahmed Al-Douri, but then I would also go to some that teach well. That's so...
No, okay, then let me rephrase it. I was complimenting their teaching, but no, I was trying to set it up.
Yeah. They are the ones that teach.
Don't just go to good colorists. Go to good colorists who teach well.
Yeah.
You've got at least three of them.
Which one would you start with?
I don't know, because I have only seen little snippets of those courses. I have not gone through those courses, so I can't say which one is best. But you could include in this.
If you want like a really well-structured theory thing, Jeremy Vickery's 101 and 102 is like a really good package.
You could have a podcast with the three of them. Do a live stream with the three of them where they duke it out for which one's is best.
Of which of their courses is best?
Yeah. Wouldn't that be great? I feel like it would be
so boring because they would just be like...
Because they're agreeable guys?
Into it.
Yeah.
They'd be like, yeah, yours is good.
Oh, but if we get some real good testosterone-fueled aggression...
Oh, give them drugs. And then
put them in...
Yeah, put them in a cage.
Oh, man, your course sucks.
Yeah, sharpen their nails.
Yeah. Celebrating toxic masculinity.
Yes. Give them all rabies.
Inject them full of toxic paint.
Toxic paint? Yes. Everyone gets a different pigment. See which one wins.
Okay, where do we go?
You get the lead. So I have one more section I want to go through, and this is a juicy one.
I'm listening.
So I want to go through some common mistakes that I brainstormed that I see with students when they're learning color. And these are in random order. The first one is bad lighting in your studio or even when you're out plein air painting. There's such a thing as bad lighting. So in your studio, this is something you can control a little bit better. Just get a neutral bulb, like 5,000 Kelvin.
Yeah.
Make sure it's bright enough.
And diffuse enough.
Yes. And put it in a spot where you're not seeing a reflection on your palette.
Right.
So you can see your colors. That's more of an issue with when you're film recording. But yeah, neutral light, high CRI rating, bright enough for your studio. That's not that hard to do. There's so many bulbs out there now, and you can just order one online. Like just do it. When you're plein air painting, you're going outdoors, don't put your painting facing the light. Because then when you go bring it inside, it's going to look very different. You're never going to look at that painting in sunlight again. You're going to paint it in sunlight, and then it will always be looked at indoors. It's going to look very different. Plus, you're going to ruin your eyes. You're going to be staring at this bright white canvas, or this canvas that's reflecting sunlight right into your eyes, and you're going to blind yourself if you do this regularly. So you get an umbrella, or you just face the painting away from the sun, so it's always in the shade. James Gurney actually has some videos about how to do good setups and diffuse the light on your canvas and all that. So good lighting, it's really important to be able to paint and observe the colors correctly. Bad reference. So painting from life is the best, but if you're going to be painting from a photo, just, you got to know that you're losing so much of color specifically when you print something out. So just try to get the highest quality print you can. As you're starting to learn, just try to avoid that as much as possible. Like you really got to learn the colors from reality, and so that you can then apply that to the photos that you're using as reference. Because if you go several years in the beginning learning color from photos, then you're just gonna take that and apply it to when you go to life, and your stuff is gonna look like photos.
Yeah.
There's so much richness and beauty in the subtleties, in the shadows, that you lose completely in a photo. For digital artists specifically, like the eyedropper addiction, if you're using reference, you just pick the color and you use it, and you pick the color, you use it. You'll never learn how to mix it. You'll never learn how to pick the right color, or just how to jazz with the colors and pick the right ones based on how they feel.
Indeed.
You're just kind of like getting an answer, which isn't even an answer. You're just picking it from a photo, which is already a bad version of color. The photo loses so much of the color. So just don't do the eyedropper thing. Don't get addicted to that, especially if you're just starting to learn color.
Good advice.
Oh God, this one. So in ateliers, this is like tube collecting.
What's it mean?
Oh, tube collect. So the teacher's demoing, 30 minutes goes by, and then a bunch of people raise their hand. They have questions. Yo, what color is that? Yeah, well, what about that one? What's that? It's like, those are the wrong questions. Because the trap there is that a lot of people think that getting the right selection of paint tubes is the answer to good color. And they'll focus in on that. They'll try to, I don't know why, but for years, they'll just try to collect the best tubes of paint. They'll go to different workshops. They'll ask this artist what their colors are, and this artist what their colors are, and they'll just get them all. And they never really get good at color, because they think the answer is the specific tubes that they choose, but it's not. You could put random colors on a palette to a good colorist, and they'll create something good, because they can, like jazz, they could just figure it out. It's like a little puzzle, and they'll harmonize anything. That's how you learn color. It's not selecting the correct tube. So just don't get into the trap of asking every instructor what color paint that is. Same with brushes. Like, what kind of brush are you using?
Yeah.
Doesn't
It's
matter.
the Kim Jong-gi. What kind of pencil is that?
Yeah, exactly. And he scoffs at them. So yeah, don't collect tubes. I mean, just those palettes I mentioned, just do that. Try to mimic other people with picking one of those palettes, and you're good. You never have to ask what color that is. Oh, local color trap. when you're painting something, you have a preconceived notion of what color something is. You're painting a red apple, it's red. So you're just going to reach for the red. The local color of something is always influenced by the light, by the environment. When you look at a red apple, you always have to start by asking, how does the environment and the lighting change that red? Is the shadow getting a reflection from the table or from the wall? Or is there a yellow apple next to it and it's got a yellow in the shadow? Is the light yellow and it's making some of the halftones a little bit more orangey, whereas the darker halftones are maybe going to more purpley? How are the colors shifting based on the light and the environment? Not, is this a red apple or a green apple? That is the more important question. So don't fall for the local color.
Yeah, because you could have a red apple that doesn't appear red at all if you light it with a colored light.
Yeah, you got a blue light. It's not going to be a red apple anymore. Yeah, we never mentioned that. It's such a part of
yeah, we
color
didn't mention that. The light. Well, we did find it out when we did those things at the Natural History Museum, that you go out and paint it outdoors, and then you come back into the room, and it's like, I didn't know I chose those colors, because you've changed the context. Mm-hmm. The way they light it in that room is very different from outdoors.
Yeah. And that's why you kind of mentioned it with the schemes. You can apply any color scheme to any subject because it doesn't matter what the color of the objects are.
Oh,
the scheme is more about the environment and the lighting conditions.
Yeah.
And you can insert any object into it. Yeah.
Otherwise, you get too literal, like a coloring book, which has its charm.
Yeah.
But yes, if you're really trying to paint something where you're inventing with a coloring book, you can invent your color. So you're already given permission.
You can go against the
numbers. You can just say, I'll do it this color because I like this color scheme. So you're immediately going into the color scheme thing of, I'm making up my own.
Oh, we should start a new group, Color Book Rebels. You go against the numbers.
I like that, yeah. We do the opposite. Oh, manipulated you.
Yeah, that's funny. All right. The next one is getting low quality paint. Mm-hmm. Some people don't have enough money to get the good ones, so they'll go for the cheapest ones, and they actually mix differently. Mm-hmm. You'll mix reds and yellows together, and you'll just get this like dirty. You won't get an orange. You'll just get some weird thing. You add white to it, and it completely destroys everything else. Right? Just the pigment doesn't hold any strength. I always heard instructors say that, and I was like, I've never experienced this. Like, what colors are bad? Like, what tube of paint is bad? I've never tried one. And then I went and I taught at a high school. And I was like, oh, this is it.
Yeah.
Now I know what they're talking about. They had, first of all, it was acrylic paint. No, sorry, it was not acrylic paint. It was water-soluble oils.
Oh, really?
And they were really cheap water-soluble oils. I'm sure there's some good ones that actually can do great stuff. But these were really cheap water-soluble oils. And I just remember mixing colors and them going towards something completely random. I was like, how did that just happen? Yeah. And I was confused because I was like trying to teach someone.
Yeah.
And I'm like trying to mix the color and I'm like, man, I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm teaching. Like I thought I was wrong for some reason because things were just not mixing the way they were supposed to.
Yeah.
And you just cannot replicate. They don't have a range at all.
Yeah.
You can't replicate what you're painting in the photo.
They're cheaper colors.
That's the problem is the pigment doesn't hold. And when you mix it with another pigment, they have some other chemical reaction that just like shifts them towards green or something when it's supposed to become orange or red. I
had the same experience. Well, Winsor Newton has a line of student watercolors called Cotmans, which was a big mistake. Cotman was a good watercolorist, British watercolorist, and they named their cheaper line after him. They're not bad. In fact, one thing I learned is I had a student who was using them, and he was so good when he'd do his little studies. His choices were so good. I thought, the cheapest watercolors that we use in this classroom, and we've got a student who's making some of the nicest watercolors from them.
I bet you can go really cheap with watercolor and still get really good paint.
But not with oil?
Not with water-soluble. No, not with oil.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I mean, you can get cheap enough to where it's like affordable for students. But I'm talking about like, these are high school, so they probably paid $5 for like a whole set.
Huge,
right? It's like, geez, what is that stuff?
Yeah, with the Winsor Newtons, when you compare the same color of the Cotman and the other one, there's no comparison. The professional line is just way better than the student line. So good materials.
The next one is high quality paint. So your paint is way too good, way too expensive. It's a similar kind of student that would always be asking what kind of paint, what kind of color that is. They're gonna go for the Rolls Royce paint tube because they think that's gonna make their painting better.
Right.
But it's not. You can get a middle of the line, affordable color that's is made well by a good brand, and it's all you need. You do not need to pay triple the price for the specific color that is going to give you magical powers or something.
Yeah.
You don't need that. In fact, if you try to do that, you might start to kind of get a little paralyzed because it's like, oh my God, this is expensive. I need to like treat this right. Or like, you don't experiment. You don't just like throw stuff on the palette. You're scared because it's so expensive. So I would stay away from going too far in either direction. Middle of the line, Gamblin, Winsor Newton.
Daniel Smith.
Sure.
Yeah.
Aren't those pretty expensive though?
Well, yeah, they are, but
the handmade
you figure burnt
mom and pop
sienna is
ones are.
always cheap. Raw sienna is always cheap. The
Sure.
Series 1 are always cheap, and there's some great Series 1
You can
colors.
go for the really high, expensive brands and get their burnt umber, and it'll also be cheap.
Yeah.
But we're talking about like if you're trying to get the full set, if you're going for cadmiums and and ceruleans and
So spend wisely.
yeah. Okay. You'll hear muddy colors a lot.
Mhm.
Muddy colors usually just mean, this is something I got from Richard Schmidt, it usually just means the temperature is wrong.
Mhm.
It might mean that it's too cold or it's too warm. And typically, not every time, but if your colors are muddy, it means you need to start shifting your temperature around. That's it.
Good observation.
Garish colors, you mentioned this. This is where everything is too saturated. This is a very beginner mistake. You default to making everything bright because your values aren't working correctly. They don't know how to make the values pop, so they make their saturation pop. And just, this was one thing I did all the time. I remember.
Every kid.
It was like, this is boring. And then I would just default to brighter colors.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I didn't know how to control the composition. I didn't know how to make my shapes more interesting. I didn't know how to make my values really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Color is the easiest one because there's already bright colors on my palette. So you just reach for those. Chalky colors. This is when you add too much white to everything.
Mm-hmm.
Even your midtones, you start reaching for white. It just it pollutes every single mixture you have. It's fine to have it in a lot of different mixtures, but it starts to get into everything. And some people aren't clean enough in their mixtures that they actually start getting white into like some of their shadows that are supposed to be a little bit more like deep and richer.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have really chalky effect, it just looks like you like smeared milk all over your painting. It just doesn't have that nice clean chroma.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean everything needs to be bright, but it's just got this white sheen over everything.
Yeah.
It doesn't look good.
Chalky is usually not a compliment.
No, it's usually not. And the same thing with the darks. The darks, it doesn't look chalky. It looks like it's covered in dust. When your shadows just got this dark dust layer to them, but then you're like, oh no, that's how you mix your paint. It doesn't have dust on it, but it looks like it does.
Yeah.
It's just, it kills your shadows.
Dusty is usually not a compliment.
The last one is being stingy with the paint tubes.
Okay.
This was very common. This is one thing that I would constantly try to get out of my students when they were setting up. This is the very beginning of class. And I would see little puddles of paint on their palette because they spent money on it. They don't want to waste any drop of paint. And that leads to bad mixtures. It's really hard not to just bring in the next mixture from the previous mixture to the next mixture because stuff there's more in your brush than you're mixing on your palette. And that just pollutes everything and you just can't mix good colors anymore. And you're just overly conscious of saving money while you're painting instead of just painting. And so I always put way too much and everybody's like, and then at the end of class, I scrape it off and throw it in the trash and they're like,
Norman Rockwell talked about that. He thought a lot of painters did not do as well as they could do because they were too stingy with the paint.
yeah. And I would say, well, you're wasting more paint because your painting sucks.
Wow.
I know it's a snarky remark, but it's
aggressive.
Wasting paint. If you're not really practicing and if you're just developing bad habits with what you're doing right now, are you actually using the paint well at all? Any of it?
Yeah.
All of it is a waste.
Good point.
So that's it. That's my list.
So are we done?
I think so. Well, Marshall, it's good to be back. Not really. We got one more episode, and then we're probably going to take a big break again.
Yeah.
It sounded like you were saying it's not really good to be back.
It's really good to be back. No, I'm just kidding. It isn't.
No, not really. We're not really back. We're back for a very short period of time. But what are we doing next week?
Next week?
Next episode, Marshall. I'm sorry.
I don't know. You tell me. What are we doing next time?
What are we doing in 10 minutes?
What are we doing?
What are we recording?
It's... No, we didn't ever mention that this is by request.
Oh, that's true.
Why did we do this one on color? It's not one I volunteered for.
So I did a Kickstarter, sold some books, and one of the rewards, or was it what is it called, a bump thing?
Stretch goals.
Stretch goal was that Marshall and I would do 2 more Draftsmen episodes, and that the people who helped to fund the campaign would decide what topics we talk about. So we did a very broad survey of like general ideas of what people like, and then we saw the results from that, and they're like, oh, people like when we talk about developing some skill stuff. So we're like, okay, then we did another survey where we gave some more specifics, and people chose color and the intermediate plateau.
The intermediate plateau in the creative process. So when you're working on a project, you get tired and you wonder whether you should quit or should go on through. Is that what it was?
Kind of. The intermediate plateau is that like most artists get stuck being intermediate artists. They never really make it to becoming like advanced professionals.
So that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you're not ready for that one?
Well, I wasn't ready for exactly that, but I think it's close enough. Now, there was a little bit of a request of Marshall doing book reports.
No, there was no request.
Yeah, there was a little bit of it. It was like a tiny
That was
percent.
the lowest rated.
Maybe it was the smallest percent of it all, but it still existed. But yeah, I know that it doesn't.
It was the lowest rated topic.
Yeah, well, thanks. I
actually voted like 100 times just to rate it.
Just to bring it down.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stan.
Screw you, Marshall.
Good seeing you.
All right, bye, everybody.